After watching this episode of Golden Kamuy, I had a sudden craving for squirrel. Greetings, my fellow anime maniacs, and welcome to my review of Golden Kamuy Episode 2, which thankfully is completely devoid of crappy-looking CG bears. This episode wastes no time in diving into the main narrative of this story, which is going to be hunting down all of these convicts. In fact, 3 major characters are introduced in this episode. We have a soldier from the 7th Division, which, according to Sugimoto, are the most hardcore of the soldiers. We have a master escape artist, and an old grizzled samurai who just looks all sorts of badass. Personally, though, my favorite thing about this episode is getting to see more of the developing relationship between Sugimoto and Asirpa. In fact, I love the fact that Sugimoto is actually quite intrigued by the Ainu culture. We get to see a lot of that in this episode, such as the traps and weapons that they use, and even the meals that they eat. They love ground-up squirrel meat, don't you? Honestly, though, it's an anime. They could make shit on a plate look delicious. I don't know what it is about anime, but they always make food look really good. And after this episode, I'm down to try some squirrel. But let's get to the brass tacks. This episode right here is all about Sugimoto and Asirpa coming to this town by the name of Otaru and trying to find any of these convicts which might be trying to hide out. They ask all over town and don't really seem to get any answers, but they know that they can set some pretty big traps. In fact, the beginning of the episode does a great job of Asirpa explaining how she sets these squirrel traps, where they put a branch up against a tree where the squirrels are going to get all lazy and they start to climb up it, and she has this twine that's wrapped around, and it's all done in these little nooses, and when they actually get caught in them, they'll actually choke to death. It just so happens that these traps work really great on escaped convicts as well, as they actually manage to catch a couple of people in this episode right here. The first one they catch is actually one of the convicts, believe it or not, but he almost immediately gets killed. And what I do think is interesting is that they actually don't plan on killing every convict and just skinning them alive. What they are going to do, however, is they're going to utilize Asirpa's ability to draw, something that apparently she's never really done before, but she's able to draw these soldiers which are completely bound up and their arms are straight out, so they can actually sort of copy and write every single thing down. The problem is the first person that they do this with immediately gets killed by this random soldier who just pops up out of nowhere, and according to Sugimoto, he belonged to this group known as the 7th Division, which were like the most hardcore of the hardcore, and he ends up having a short scuffle with Sugimoto, which is really awesome, with Sugimoto almost seemingly coming out on top until this guy manages to defeat Sugimoto with a friggin' Three Stooges move by poking him right in the eyes. This guy runs off and ends up falling off of a cliff and landing into the water, but is eventually picked up by a group which is going to involve another very important character of the series, but we'll get into him just a little bit. Right after that, though, we get to see that their traps happen to spring another person, and this guy is the master escape artist. This prisoner goes by the name of Shiraishi Yoshitake, and he is a master escape artist in that he can pretty much hide implements all over his body, but he prefers to hide them in his mouth and can even swallow things and regurgitate them later in order to help himself out. He is actually captured and bound up like the previous prisoner in the episode, but when Sugimoto and Asirpa actually get distracted by this wild rabbit that they're trying to hunt, he spits this weird thing out which is actually attached to a string and on his teeth, and he actually uses that and grabs it with his friggin' feet and cuts himself loose and starts to run away. That's when Sugimoto decides to give chase, and just like the previous prisoner, they end up falling over the side and into some water. Now they are freezing to death. They have to start a fire within 10 minutes or they are going to die. And I didn't expect to learn anything in this episode, but wow, how cool is it that they were able to start a fire by utilizing a bullet, planting it in a log, and then smacking it with a knife and actually igniting the gunpowder within. That was a really cool moment. It was made even crazier by the fact that this bullet actually came from Shiraishi. He actually managed to like puke out this like massive sniper bullet out of nowhere. It just makes me think, I wonder where all these other things are going to be stuck all over his body, which leads to all sorts of creepy things I know. But that's when things start to get a little goofy. This show does have a good sense of humor. It is an anime after all, and it doesn't seem like it wants to take itself entirely too seriously. And both Shiraishi and Sugimoto unfortunately have to team up with one another so that they can survive. And Sugimoto actually allows this guy to escape, probably knowing that their paths are going to cross yet again. With that, however, we also get to learn a little bit more about some of the other characters who are going to be appearing in the series, such as another one of these convicts who not only escaped from his would-be guards, but he managed to kill them with his samurai skills. That's right, we're gonna have an old, badass, grizzled samurai in the series. He goes by the name of Hijikata Toshizo, and all I know is, wow, can't wait to see more of this guy. Just for the fact that he's a cool, old, like, samurai character, and within the time frame of this story, this is when the samurai, the shogunate, were basically being ostracized and pushed away by modern culture. This is a guy who's desperately trying to fight for everything that he's lived for, while also simultaneously trying to get a lot of gold in the process, and it looks like his organization is definitely going to be clashing with Sugimoto's, and I can't wait to see how all that's going to go down. So what's the rundown on this episode of Golden Kamuy? This was another really good episode, which poured on a little bit more of the humor, which I honestly have to say was very surprising. All of the scenes with Sugimoto and the second prisoner, Shiraishi, was very surprising. It almost looks like these guys are going to be buddies, and I have a theory that some of the convicts they are eventually going to meet might actually become a part of their team or their party and actually help them in finding these other prisoners. It can't just be Sugimoto and a Sherpa the entire time. We're basically forming a Straw Hat pirate crew here of would-be ridiculous convicts, and I can't wait to see them. This episode also made it painfully clear that there are going to be some crazy character designs in this show. There's a character who appears like literally in the last scene of the episode who looks like something like out of Full Metal Alchemist. It doesn't look like something that would exist in real life, and considering this is a show that's going for more realism, I applaud it for doing something kind of strange like this. This is a series that is going to have to, I think, get a little more creative in order to hook the viewer just a little bit more, and I like that they're doing that. It's separating it from what could arguably be just a standard war story about an ex-soldier. Speaking of which, there are little subtle clues in this episode to show how hardcore Sugimoto's life has actually been. When they're going around town and questioning people, there's a scene where he's in a hot springs and we get to see the damage that's been done to his body, and it's hard to look at. There are scars on him that look so fresh and deep and disturbing, it's a haunting image, and you can tell that it's something that he has to live with every day. I also like the fact that they did make it firmly clear that he himself is not a killer. He's not a psychopath. He's willing to kill people, but only if they try to kill him first. That's just something that I think is really cool. As for the mysterious soldier who appeared in this episode, I'm not sure what his deal is ultimately going to be, but he had a really great first impression. That and the fact that his personality just comes across as very cold and kind of scary. He looks very emotionless with all of the things that he does here, and to be one of these hardcore soldiers, you have to imagine that he's probably been thrown through the ringer once or twice. I also thought that it was really cool that when he was trying to snipe them from afar, in order to steady his gun, he took a knife and stabbed it into the side of a tree and used that to actually rest the gun on it. I just thought that was a nice, cool little touch. A lot of the best things about this series are definitely in the details, the small details, and the little things that actually build upon the characters and their cultures. In particular, the scene of a Sherpa cooking squirrel for Sugimoto. I really loved that scene, and how they also explained a little bit more about the culture of the Ainu, how the men from that organization actually have to appease the women by creating these like knives and sheaths, and depending on how good they look, it'll show how much of a good husband and provider that they're actually going to be. You can definitely tell that Sherpa definitely loves her Ainu culture and is doing every single thing in her power to not only keep it alive, but to spread the word about it. And you can see that it's certainly having something of an effect on Sugimoto as he's starting to warm up to what is ultimately an alien culture to him. And considering that they're practically in the same place and almost come from the same exact, background, it's a really striking thing. But this episode right here was a great build-up, and the fact that we've already gotten, like, this many people with tattoos this early on in the series, these really are just the ones that are, like, the cannon fodder, the Goombas of the series. But the fact that we did have a character who did manage to get away, we're definitely going to see him again, especially for how goofy he was and his interactions with Sugimoto. I just want to see more from him, and I can't imagine them killing off a character like that, as he doesn't really seem that dangerous, just a fun-loving guy who just wants to be free from everyone. That and his whole gimmick of being able to escape from just about anything through the way he hides things around his body, I think that's going to lead to a lot of really great scenes down the line. As far as production value goes, it's about what you would expect from the first episode, but thankfully no CG things to fight against. It made it a more consistently looking better episode than the first, as well as way less distracting than the first. I will say that it's not reinventing the wheel or anything, but I still absolutely love the premise of the show and where it could potentially be going in the future, so I'm definitely in this one for the long haul. I'm very excited for this show, which is still giving off something of a Western vibe while being set in a Japanese setting, and the fact that samurai are going to get involved is awesome. Hopefully we'll see some ninja too, and all sorts of crazy action as we search for the prisoners and the lost gold. This was a pretty good episode. Like the first one, I really enjoyed it, mostly because of the actual premise itself. That, and I think the characters are really interesting. So I'm going to give this one right here a 4 out of 5. This episode was great, and if I could describe it in one word, it would be cold. This episode made me feel cold the entire time, and that's because of the atmosphere. It was done so great in this episode, very reminiscent of the movie The Revenant. I brought that up in the last episode, I'm bringing it up again here. You can definitely see a little bit of that influence here, and it makes the actual landscape itself that more dangerous and a character in and of itself. What I'm trying to say is, Golden Kamuy has a lot of potential, and you should definitely be checking it out. If you did watch the episode, I would love to hear your thoughts about it, and you can tell me in the comments section below. Did you like this episode? Are you not really gelling with Golden Kamuy quite yet? Do you have any theories as to what's going to be happening later on in the series? Let's start a discussion in the comments section. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, stay down, baby.